USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Weekend Review podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online at USCHO.com. A look at this weekend in college hockey and a review of the top news of the week.
Welcome to USCHO Weekend Review for Monday, March 21st, 2022. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. This podcast is brought to you by DCU Digital Federal Credit Union. What will DCU mean to you? Find out today by visiting dcu.org. Membership required. Well, it was a great weekend of hockey as conference champions were crowned, but it didn't come without a little bit of controversy in the CCHA. In overtime, it appeared that Minnesota State had won, but upon further review, a whole series of things unwound. And Derek, you've dug into this a little bit. Tell us a little bit about what happened there and kind of what it would be like from a coach's standpoint to be in the midst of all this.
Well, all I can say is wow, because there were 3 overtime games going on at the same time. What a weekend of hockey it was. And you always say the championship weekends are great, but buckle up would have been the key going into that weekend because there was a lot of drama. And I did talk to Tom Serratori last night. He's a friend of mine, and we just talked a little bit in generalities about it. But long story short, I think it's been well documented. Trophies given out, the goal scored, trophies given out. Bemidji goes in the locker room, sees on video that it did not go in, comes out. Tom comes out, talks to Mike Hastings, Don Lucia. They get the referee and chief involved. They watch it, make the decision to call it no goal. And then they go back out and figured out the best way to play. And I think the end all be all of it is they got it right. And I think that's what we have. And I know Jimmy's going to bring about the faults that we had with this scenario, but they eventually got it right. And they did a good job in doing the right thing for those student athletes. That's why the replay system's there to get it right and do the right thing for the student athletes. So I don't have a problem with it. I'll tell you as a coach, Mike Hastings must have, what a class act by him to be able to just say, hey, you're right. Let's go back out. Let's play. I mean, also it's probably helped that you're the number 2 seed already and you got nothing to lose except the playoff championship. But they did everything the right way. And I don't know how you get your players up from celebrating, getting the hats, going in the locker room and then telling them, hold on, we may have to go back out there. I mean, that was an unprecedented job by Mike to be able to do that. And obviously Bemidji's in their locker room going, hey, we got another chance here, guys. Wipe off your tears. Your college career isn't over. Let's go out and do this. And that's college hockey at its best right there.
Yeah, I agree with you, Derek. It's nice to see that they got it right in the end for the student athlete. But the fact that you got to that point is an abject failure. The video review, from what the league says in their release, the video review system did not have access to every camera angle. That's number one, that you've got to have every camera angle in the building fed into the same video system and have it working. Number 2, postseason, every goal is supposed to be reviewed by an official. That means there's somebody in a room somewhere, up in the stands, up in the press box, wherever it is, they're watching every goal. And whoever was that official and said that was a good goal and never looked at the thought of an overhead angle, it was lazy. It's lazy. And that, I think, is a real teaching point to all of the leagues for when you're using this video review system. Take a good look at every goal. I was at the Hockey East tournament, and that game, again, went to overtime. UMass scores the game winner, and it took 90 seconds or so for them to make sure that it didn't hit a high stick. Everybody knew it redirected. It ended up going off a defensive player, but they took the 90 seconds to make sure everything about it. I've talked with Steve Piotrowski, who's from the Big Ten, was at the NCAA for a long time. Frank Cole, who's the head of officiating in the NCAA, about this in the past, not since this has happened, but in the past. And they said the most important part of video review is looking at the angles and making sure you can confidently say it was a good goal. There is no way that somebody looked at all the angles of that goal and confidently said it crossed between the two posts, because it was obvious. It should have been less than 2 minutes to determine that net had come up and the puck had gone in the side of the net and not crossed between the two posts. That's where the failure comes in. And it's just such a black eye on the CCHA. I mean, they got absolutely hammered on social media all weekend, and for good reason. Do I agree? Do I think that it was good that for the student athletes that they can all feel we won a championship fair and square? Absolutely. Did it give Bemidji another chance when they deserved it? Absolutely. So yes, there's things that were done well, but it all starts with somebody didn't do their job.
Well, there are a couple of things that come to mind. I know that even within leagues, let alone from league to league, there is not a standardized video system throughout the country, even throughout the same conference. Now, I know some conferences like Hockey East have the same software and same video review at each place. We've talked about that, Jim. So that may be one thing. Second thing, do we need to have somebody who's a designated video official there at all games? Somebody maybe who's retired from being an on-ice official, or somebody who has been approved or gone through the right training or the right vetting to be able to do that? Do we need somebody like that at games, or at least at playoff games, to make sure that all the angles are there, everything is done? And do we need to refine some of this stuff in the rule book? I know there are a couple of things. There should be a little bit more detail on reviews. There should be more detail on what constitutes the end. You know, some folks who are on social media, somebody who says he's an attorney says he knows that the rules weren't followed. Well, I don't necessarily agree with that, because as we were talking before the show, Derek, there's some ambiguity in the rules on what constitutes the end of it. But it seems to me that when you have something like that, yeah, the players are going to celebrate. They think they have a goal, but you take everybody over to the benches and you make sure you spend the 2 minutes or the 3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes if you have to. You look at the video before you move on from that. And maybe some of those things have to be spelled out a little bit better in the rule book. And it is a rule year, so they've got the opportunity to do that too.
Well, they definitely will do something to fix that. I mean, there's no doubt. We played Mercyhurst a couple years ago in the finals in the overtime, and we celebrated, we scored, we celebrated, and all of a sudden, as a coach, you immediately start thinking, oh no, and then you see people talking, and then you try to get everybody calmed down a little bit, and then I got to yell at the referee that they already used their challenge, or they used their timeout, they can't challenge, and then the referee comes over and tells me that all goals in the playoffs are reviewed, and then you remember that, and there's just so much going on and so much emotion at that time. So it does. There needs to be. I don't think you're going to stop the emotion. We don't want a Brett Hall goal. I mean, in Buffalo happening like it could have been there. But somebody that's not an off-ice administrator, off-ice official, whatever, has to remind everybody that every goal is reviewed and that it's different than the regular season. And then if there's any chance that they're going to look at it, because every chance there's a goal scored that they will look at it. But you forget in the emotion. We scored, we're celebrating, we're jumping up and down, we're advancing. And then all of a sudden we got to take 2 minutes, and the second celebration is just as good as the first. But, it just takes somebody with a cooler head to think about that.
Yeah, I talked to Brian Murphy, who's the director of officials in Hockey East, and he's a former longtime NHL official. And, he said that he has been discussing extensively with the rules committee that there needs to be a lot more clarification on some of these rules. He said the college rule book is extremely ambiguous in too many areas. And I think one of the things he was talking about was, when is a game actually over? It's not as clear as the NHL rulebook. He's proposed to put some things, some rules in, some clarifications to rules in. So we'll see in this rules year. And I know at the Frozen Four, we'll get a chance to talk with folks like Ty Halpin from the NCAA and Frank Cole and probably Steve Petrowski. So we'll hear a little bit more on our broadcast from the Frozen Four, but something has to be done. And I agree, Derek, you forget in the emotion of the moment that there are procedures as a coach, but as a league, you can't forget those procedures. You've got to make sure you follow everything to the T to avoid situations like this one.
Well, let's move on to some other hockey. What a great series it was for Minnesota Duluth between winning on the road in the quarterfinals and getting 2 shutouts for the championship. How about Minnesota Duluth? They were 5th overall in the league in the regular season, league champions, got some momentum going. Is Minnesota Duluth getting ready for another Frozen Four at this point?
Well, it feels like it. This is the similar Duluth teams that we've seen make runs in the last 5 years. And, the same old style. Grab a lead, lock it down, play great defense, get great goaltending, take home trophies. And that's exactly what they did in the Frozen Face-Off out at Excel this weekend. Great hockey. I can't say that they dominated opponents, but there was no doubt, that they were going to win that championship when you jump out to a 2-0 lead as Duluth, and you have that great defense that we know Scott Sandelin teams seem to play mostly in the postseason, but at times all year round. And then you have good goaltending, and they've got it all. And they are my team that is not a number 1 seed that probably has the best opportunity to make a run in this tournament.
Yeah, you're right on the money there, Jimmy. I was thinking that. I mean, what was it, 2 weeks ago we were talking if they were going to have enough wins to get over the 500 mark to be able to be in the tournament. Right. Now, obviously they won their tournament, so they would have got in, but we were discussing if they were going to be an at-large, if they'd have enough wins. But, you talked about getting a lead, and Western Michigan had been behind in all 4 of their games in the NCHC playoffs. And they had done some of their best work when they were behind. They just ran into a team that they couldn't spot a lead to and catch up. And I think it shows the depth of the conference. You got a team that's got to go on the road and win in the first round, and then they go and win 2 in the tournament. And there they are. But it just shows the depth of the conference, and they are poised. And I know that we're each going to pick a kind of our dark horse, and you got them. So I guess I'll have to save mine for later.
Well, how about Michigan? Now, things really came together well for the Wolverines. First of all, strangely enough, they may have benefited by being the 2nd overall seed in the Big Ten instead of the 1st overall seed, because that win at Minnesota counted 1.2 times a win in the RPI plus the bonus points. It would have been 0.8 of a win at home, and that's the thing that Minnesota State ran into, beating Bemidji State. Things came together, and of course, folks started bringing up the game that they canceled in the GLI against Western Michigan, and that may have impacted that. Had they beaten Western Michigan, they might have sewn up number 1 overall in the pairwise before now. Had they lost, that could have been a different story. But all that aside, Michigan seems to be playing some of its best hockey of the season right now. People were doubting in the middle of the season, well, maybe they're not all they're cracked up to be, but does Mel Pearson have this Wolverines team playing their best hockey right now?
Well, I'll tell you this. It was interesting to watch that game unfold against Minnesota. I mean, what an atmosphere they had. The largest crowd ever at the new Mariucci Arena. The place is going, rocking. They go D to D into a breakaway for a goal in the first 30 seconds, and Michigan comes back with a response, scores the next shift, and we're at a minute 17 into the game, and we got 2 goals already scored. I mean, people were thinking of how tight this was going to be, and it ended up being tight. But the response that Michigan showed when they gave up that first goal and the crowd to come back and take a 4-1 lead, and then Minnesota got too late. But they might have it going at the right time. That's for sure. And I know you brought up the Western Michigan thing. I've always been negative towards that. that whole scenario happening. So I'll just move on from it. I'll let you handle that for me, Ed.
I think that, I've always said that, Michigan's lineup, they needed some time, I think, as a team to probably get a little older, and the experience of these younger players now, so with some sprinkled in, veteran leadership on that team, I think is paying dividends, and that, great weekend of hockey, out in Minnesota, for the state of Minnesota in general. 3 championships all played in the state. I think that was pretty fantastic. But to see that crowd at Mariucci on Saturday night, that's pretty special, because, don't forget, we're just a couple of years removed from, I think, Mariucci hosting maybe it was a first round game, and there looked like there was, friends and family discount for tickets, and nobody else could get in because there were so few fans in the stands. I think that was 3 years ago. This was what you want to see from Minnesota, and their crowds, their fans are back on the bandwagon. I'm glad to see, because that's a school when they have success and you get them in a Frozen Four and their fans are there in force, it's pretty great. And I've seen them win 2 national titles, and both times they make the building electric. So I think that Michigan, to play that type of a game, they did have to survive, and it was a little scary at the end maybe, but you found a way to win on the road. As you said, Ed, that helped them move up to the number 1 overall seed in the tournament. But I think that, both of those teams are really scary teams leaving, their conference tournament and heading to the NCAAs, because both of them are playing really good hockey.
Well, let's turn to Harvard. This is a team that had to win to get in, and they have been come from behind crimson over the last couple of weeks. In the quarterfinals against RPI, they were down 3-0 in the first game, came back with 3 third-period goals to tie it, and then won in overtime. They came from behind to beat Clarkson on Friday night, and then won in overtime against Quinnipiac on Saturday to be the league champions of ECAC hockey. So they're the 15th overall seed, and that gives them the opportunity to play Minnesota State, which is a pretty big feat right there. But, given how Harvard's playing right now, Jim, you see a bit of Harvard around the Boston area. How far can Harvard go?
You know what? If they can play as fearlessly as they did on Saturday night against Quinnipiac, then I think that they have some potential to be a really big upset type of team. They've got a lot of talent. I think that one of the big things for Harvard as this season got started, and they rolled through their first few games, then they really hit some skids. I know they had some injuries, but, I also think that the rust of not playing last year, hurt Harvard a lot. And it was, their team became really a young team of freshmen and sophomores that hadn't played any college hockey yet. And I think that Teddy got them playing well down the stretch. And they were one of the hotter teams going into the tournament. Then you mentioned that comeback versus RPI. I think that gave them some believability. They get the win against Clarkson. And then, everybody has kind of feared Quinnipiac this year, and for good reason. It's hard to score against them. And Harvard only got 17 shots on net. They were outshot 49-17. But your goalie plays well. You find ways to get goals. I think that they are a dangerous team. Listen, all 16 teams that are in the field have danger to them. Even an AIC team that I think people don't think have a lot of hope in this tournament. I think that you look at a Harvard team that if they can go out, have some of those really good blue chip players that are young, but now a little bit more experienced in college hockey, they can play well. You get good goaltending like you did on Saturday night. You could, next thing you know, you could win a couple of games and be headed to, play the Frozen Four in your backyard. So that would be a dream come true, I'm sure, for Teddy Donato and his Harvard team.
Yeah, I think they're going to have a really tough time with Minnesota State. I saw people online saying how people still call it Mankato. I get that way. It's just habit. I watched Minnesota State 2 years ago. I was the site rep in Providence with the 4-1 when Providence went through and beat Minnesota State. And in the first game and then beat Cornell in the second game. I think their guard's going to be really up. I think Minnesota State has learned from that. They went to the Frozen Four. This is the time for Minnesota State. We've talked about which 4 seed is going to be it. I would say, and I'm not a very good gambler. I don't gamble, but I think this is a Minnesota State all the way. And Harvard has did a great job. I watched that game and talk about the, I'm trying to think of the right word, because in slang, how coaches would use it is not how I need to use it on here. The guts that Rand Pecknold showed to pull his goalie on a power play with 6 minutes left in the game. 6 minutes left in the game. So I think everybody knows what I want to say, but the guts that he did, I was sitting here going, wow. And then it worked. I mean, Rand looked like a genius there. But Harvard bounced back. Harvard rope-a-dope that last couple minutes to get to where one shot wins it. And no matter what the shots were, they're in the NCAA tournament. But this is going to be a challenge for them with Minnesota State.
Let's turn the other 2 Eastern leagues. I want to start with Hockey East. And before we talk about UMass and its back-to-back league championships, how about Mike Kavanaugh's UConn Huskies taking UMass to overtime in the championship game? UConn has had a really terrific season, and they've really laid a good foundation going forward.
Yeah, certainly, Ed. I was really proud for Mike Cavanaugh and his team, and got to talk to a couple of their players after the game. And, they talked about the believability that their coach brought to them, especially this weekend. They had never won a playoff game in the history of their time in Hockey East. They were 0-9. They get that first win last Saturday at home, and the celebration was pretty palpable. And I when they scored the empty net goal on Friday night against Northeastern, I kind of looked at the bench, and the players were really excited, but Mike Cavanaugh a little bit more calm this time. And it's almost like act like you've been here before. And he has. I think he said to me after the game, he said, my record now in championship games is 9-3. All those 9 wins came with Boston College when he was an assistant and associate head coach. But, he sent the right messages to that team. They were darn close. They had some good opportunities, especially in that second period. They had taken a 1-0 lead. UMass had battled back, but then UConn got their skates under them for the last 2-3 minutes. And, I think that, if they had popped one more late, I think that they had the lockdown going in that third period. There weren't a lot of shots for either team. I think it was 7-2 in the third, but then in the overtime, you kind of felt that, kind of like Derek just used the word rope-a-dope, and it felt like that's kind of what UConn had just done. But UMass gets, they have some talented players, and Bobby Trevino, he made a great pass and set up the game-winning goal. And that's, that is really, really, I think, what made that so dramatic for UMass was getting that OT winner. I also felt good for UMass that they got to win a tournament in front of their fans. They won their first Hockey East tournament last year, but it was in front of an empty building. And I think that their fans turned out in mass. There was probably a good, 7,000 fans just from UMass in the building on Saturday night. It was really good to see Greg Carville, his staff, his players get to celebrate, lift that trophy in front of a big UMass crowd.
I did not watch that game, so I know you were in the building, Jimmy, but I just go back to watching how the national championship game last year is, how they were ready to play and how they dissected the Frozen Four last year. And it seems to me how they played it in reading and everything online is very similar. They're primed. They're ready to go and they're ready to defend. Even though they've lost a lot of guys, they've lost, I think they turned over 8 from last year. I think that they've got something going right now. And, I think that this is a team that you can't sleep on. Can't sleep on them at all. Defending champions, yes, you go, oh yeah, okay. But they're right there. And this is a team that could be very dangerous.
In Atlantic Hockey, AIC moved to its 3rd consecutive league championship. They had quite a battle on Friday, a game they trailed 3 times before prevailing with a 5-4 victory over Mercyhurst, and actually it was a 4-3 game. They scored an empty netter to make it 5-3, and then Mercyhurst got an extra attacker. So they really had to hang on in that. In the championship game, a 2-0 lead early, and then a couple of bad goals given up by Air Force made it 4-0. They rolled to a 7-0 win. The oldest team in college hockey, Eric Lang's Yellow Jackets. And Derek, you've seen the program he's built and how he's turned it around. They've got a tough one coming up against the top seed Michigan, but it's really quite an accomplishment to have put together the program that Eric Lang has at AIC. Yeah,
he's done a great job. And, once they got Eric, they brought him back as an alum. He got into their culture, found ways to get the players that he is and use the international part of their name of their college. We say AIC, but it's American International. And he went out and he got a lot of international players and found out how to get them in and all of that because of their school and their policy. And he's figured out kind of his apple cart there, and he's got it rolling. And he's a very good coach. He's got everybody into the culture of the Yellow Jackets, and I'm happy for Eric. I think Eric does an outstanding job, and he's got it going right now. And to be the man, you got to beat the man, and nobody's been able to beat him. And right now, you saw the oldest team in college hockey versus the youngest team in the finals. So it was interesting to watch from afar on TV to not have an interest of knowing Atlantic hockey as well as I had in the past. And but that being said, if you looked at Eric's team, it just looks like the same team over and over and over again with different nameplates. So congratulations to them. But they've got a big, big challenge ahead of them.
Yeah, what a route in that championship game. And, talk about being able to win two different ways. You get the game, you kind of have to survive on Friday against an upstart Mercyhurst team that really came on at the end of the season. And then, you go in and then you just dominate. And that's that domination is just, it's going to be a dream for a coach to sit on a bench and know you're winning a championship and there's still 20 minutes to go in the game. That's going to be a good feeling. But hey, I got to ask, you guys have the Atlantic hockey connections. Where were the fans? A total of 1,153 fans over 2 nights. That tournament, I know they moved to Utica. I mean, what do they have to do right in that league to get fans at the stadium?
I had quite a discussion about that with some folks who cover it. And, everybody wants to point at the league, but I'm going to point at the teams in the league. American International averages 305 fans at home. They did this past season. How many people are going to travel to a game if you only get 305 at home? There are 4 teams in the league this past year that averaged over 1,000 in attendance. Only, Mercyhurst and RIT were at that. RIT brought about 800 fans on Friday, not so many fans from the other schools. I think the disappointment in this one is there were a lot of promises made by Utica, New York, and Oneida County, where the city is, that they would bring in fans because they're a good hockey town. They have the AHL Comets there who sell out that 4,000-seat building pretty regularly. That Saturday afternoon, a 2 p.m. game, quarterfinal, Utica University hosting University of New England, D3 NCAA quarterfinal, had over 3,000 people in the building. So it's a hockey town. I think the problem is the teams need to start building fan bases and the league needs to step up marketing. But I think it starts with the schools. And, we've seen in the past, and we'll see it again when Atlantic hockey gets off the dime and brings back Robert Morris into the league. But Robert Morris packs the building at home, and the fans of Robert Morris travel. If it had been a home game, a home series for AIC, I don't think we would have seen any better attendance than we saw this weekend. So I pointed at the schools. They need to develop, they need to market, they need to build fan bases. If you don't have people showing up at your games at home, they're not going to travel to a championship.
Thanks for taking all that off my plate, Ed. We've got an application for reinstatement in, so I'm just going to pass 100% on that one. I'm taking the fifth, but you know what? I will go it. I agree with you in some points, and I disagree with you in others. I do believe that they put a lot of effort in the local community and tried to get it. I mean, go back to Rochester. We had commercials on TVs, flagpoles in town, banners. People knew it was coming. It was an event. I just think it's new. I think when it started in Rochester, and the reason it became an event was because RIT was there every year right off the bat. And then when RIT stopped coming, what happened? People stopped coming. And then now we've been to Buffalo. Last year we were on campus sites. And this year Atlantic Hockey's in a new market. Give it some time.
Well, and I will say this, that Utica and the arena and the league ran an outstanding event. It was a top quality video production showcasing it. Everything ran like clockwork. The folks in the arena did a terrific job. I think from a geographical standpoint, since it's located kind of in the middle for everybody in the league, that it's a good location. The building size is about right. Yeah, maybe it just needs to have a little bit more there. And there's still the talk, Utica University has some rumblings about taking all their programs from Division III to Division II. And their head coach, Gary Heenan, wants to have a D1 hockey program there. And they've been knocking on the door of Atlantic Hockey. And it could be a situation like you saw in Rochester, although I think it's tougher now to come into a league and be competitive right away. But they have built a hockey program with tradition, which is why when RIT joined Atlantic Hockey, they had a built-in fan base because they'd already built a hockey tradition at Division III. But I do want to say, even though there's some criticism about attendance, it was an extremely well-run event. The atmosphere in the building, even with a small crowd, was good because it's a loud building. And the folks in the league did everything right as far as running the tournament.
That's I'll edit there. That's for Steve Metcalf, because he'll eventually call me or Jimmy and tell that we turn this into an Atlantic Hockey podcast. So Steve, we're cutting it off right now for you.
And we're going to take a break right here so that we have enough for the second half of the program. We're going to talk about the NCAA brackets, our reaction to it, and also a look at what we think maybe the best first round matchups are, and if there's a 4-1 upset waiting to happen. That when we continue after this word from our sponsor, DCU Digital Federal Credit Union. Visit dcu.org.
This is the USCHO Weekend Review podcast from US College Hockey Online.
Sometimes it's not about wanting a new car, it's about needing one. And I needed one I could rely on. So I got an auto loan with DCU. They offer the same low rates on both new and used cars, and I was able to borrow a little extra to make a used car as good as new. My auto loan from DCU means a ride I can finally rely on, which feels like a pretty big thing. What will DCU mean to you? Insured by NCUA. Membership required. Visit dcu.org.
And we're back with Weekend Review. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Derek Schooley, Jim Connelly. The bracket, Jim, you had a chance to talk to Mike Kemp, who's done a terrific job as chair of the committee, especially last year when it was a thankless job. Very close to following the pairwise with a couple of changes to make sure that you didn't have first round matchups within a league. And then taking a look at where the best place was to put each bracket for maximum attendance. It seems to me that they did probably the best possible job they could have. Your initial thoughts on it since you've been digging into it?
I think they actually did a great job. I had missed it on Saturday night when Jason Moy and I were kind of trying to figure out that last possible bracketology. And I aligned everything and noticed that there was some really good matchups. The only conflict that they had was St. Cloud State against North Dakota. And instead of moving what they did, which was to swap them in Notre Dame, I had swapped St. Cloud State and UMass. That changed my brackets entirely. But then I noticed what they did. They were able to, in the first round, line up 1-16, 2-15, 3-14, 4-13, which is great because you really protect the top 4 seeds and give them the team that they were supposed to face. Because they did that, I think they've helped attendance, but maybe didn't help, say, Worcester as much as possible. I noted in my story last night that UMass Lowell is going to head out to Loveland to face Denver. Northeastern will stay in Worcester. Northeastern does not draw anywhere near as well as UMass Lowell does in terms of fans. So you might have left some money on the table there just to maintain the bracket integrity. I think you've got UMass and Worcester. You've got, Northeastern, even of Minnesota, which can, like I said earlier, can draw pretty well at times. So I think you'll have a pretty okay gate in Worcester, but I think they could have made it better. Knowing that Loveland is already pretty much sold out, it didn't matter who was going out there as the 4 seed, but they wanted the bracket integrity. I give them the credit for that because we've seen it too often where, you're the number 2 overall seed and you end up playing the toughest possible number 4 seed. And, maybe because of that, you might lose. I don't know. Once we get to this point, I don't really care who plays who, because I think that all 16 teams are pretty good. So, but I think that was the only thing that I saw but even when we filled out our final bracketology, we said that you had to leave, Lowell out in Denver because it was possible to still protect gates around the country.
Yeah, it's a thankless job. Everybody's going to have an opinion on it. Even last year, we thought we did the best we could, and we did. But then you have some cancellations and some things like that, and it's a thankless job. And I think they got it right. Like I said, the only thing that we could debate all day long is if you keep Lowell in Worcester, but then you're also potentially, maybe sending two other teams out east, or you're switching Northeastern and Western doesn't get the right, like you said, bracket integrity. So yeah, that's the one scenario that you could have. Then they were handcuffed. They were handcuffed by the interconference matchup. And I was watching the show, and I didn't catch the whole thing. And then I thought Mike Kemp went into saying we have an interconference bracket matchup, and I was like, whoa, they really went off the grid and they're going to go against it. And then he kept moving forward, and I caught what he was saying. But I really, I don't have any complaints with it. You got some small ones, but that's about it.
I think there was some consideration about whether the Michigan bracket and the Minnesota State bracket, which one should go to Albany and which one should go to Allentown. Allentown may have some attendance issues, although AIC and Quinnipiac, well, we already talked about AIC, but Quinnipiac within some driving distance. Michigan's going to bring some fans. What about that decision there? I mean, wherever you were going to put North Dakota, you weren't going to have to worry. And plus, it's not that far a trip for Harvard to get to Albany. Did they make the right decision there, or is that kind of more of a toss-up?
Well, I think if you look at the history of Albany, and I'm looking at the last couple of years, Albany hasn't drawn great. I could be wrong, but I watched last year. Obviously, we had attendance issues everywhere last year, but Albany's been one that always bids, and they always do a really outstanding job, but they always have some attendance issues unless a local team's there. There isn't a local team to be able to put there. There isn't an RIT there. There isn't a Cornell, a Colgate. So I think by putting North Dakota there, you guaranteed that good draw in Albany. You potentially still, Michigan's going to travel well. Quinnipiac's going to travel well. And I have been impressed when I've seen St. Cloud at the Frozen Fours of how they've drawn or traveled. So that could be a sneaky draw on St. Cloud. I think they did it right.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Derek. I hope North Dakota brings their fans out to Albany. A little bit of a tough place to get to from anywhere in the country. You don't have really a great regional airport there. You can fly to Boston and drive. You can't, it's not really drivable from Buffalo. There's not a large airport. I guess Boston is probably your closest large airport, maybe Hartford. But that's the one thing I'm concerned about, is that North Dakota fans won't make the trip because it's too hard to get to. But we'll see. We knew Allentown was going to be the issue. As soon as Penn State wasn't there, once Mercyhurst was eliminated, and I'm not sure I've seen them bring some decent crowds in NCAA tournaments way past that they were in. But I don't have any argument with this bracket. Once it came up, I kind of did all the math and figured out how many times you had that, bracket integrity, the two seeds of the game add up to the number 17. If you have that as many times as possible, and you have it all but twice, the North Dakota Notre Dame and Quinnipiac St. Cloud State are the only games that the two seeds don't add up to 17. Quinnipiac and St. Cloud State add up to 18. North Dakota Notre Dame add up to 16. Everywhere else it's 17, which is bracket integrity. That's the perfect matchup. So I'm fine with how they did it. I think that it'll be a good regional all around. All four regions, solid hockey, ready to go.
What do you guys think about the times? I mean, you're not going to have any crossover in games. You're going to be able to watch hockey from end to end. What do you think?
When I saw those come out on the selection show last night, selfishly, as a media person who's going to be covering games in Albany, I said, wow, that's great. Because sometimes we're just wrapping up trying to file a story and the next game is getting started. But that really helps out if a game goes into overtime. You've got enough room from a fan standpoint. That's a long time to wait in between. You're going to have like 3 hours after the game is done. But, staggering the times for TV and leaving enough time so that you don't have to disrupt a second game if the first one goes into overtime. It was pretty interesting to me. We'll see how it works out. If it does avoid some clashes for overtime, great, they will have accomplished it. Maybe noon's a little early to start on this, but I think it makes sense.
As a coach, and I'll let you go with what you wanted to say, Jimmy, after. As a coach, I want to play as close to normal times as possible. We don't play games at noon. I can see sitting in the room in Naples already right now, hearing whoever played in those noon games complaining about playing in noon games. You don't play them during the regular season. That's my biggest fault with the noon start times.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that goes into this. I've had fans reach out and say, are we going to be stuck in the arena all day? I did verify that with Mike Kemp. He said that all tickets will be able to have you scan them twice so you can leave the arena after the first game, come back for the second game. So you're not going to be stuck in the arena all day paying, expensive concession prices. The fact that you now have all of the games start times staggered and spread out so that we don't have to put any games onto ESPN3 and have them streamed only, and having all the complaints that, oh my God, my game's not on TV. This isn't fair. We've listened to that for a number of years. And the only way to do that is to spread the times out. We had that opportunity. And it's just, as far as the start times go, Derek, I think, I worked around Norm Bazin, the UMass Lowell coach, for years. And he always said he loved playing in-season tournaments because it took you out of your routine. You might be playing a 3 o'clock game or a 3:30 or a 4 o'clock game. He's scheduled home games before 1 o'clock in the afternoon. He said that, all season you have the chance to prep for these things. You might as well find a couple of opportunities to play these early games. I get it. Teams get into routines, but it's, I think the national champions should be able to break their routine a little bit to have some success.
Oh, Jimmy, you haven't sat in those rooms.
I haven't. I've heard the conversations.
Yeah. Wait till the higher seeds in those 12 o'clock games are out, and it's. You're right, though. You're not going to make everybody happy, but 4 o'clock is much different than noon, and it's. I can see it. A noon start, really, nobody, I want to know, and this might be great for the preparation, how many noon starts there were in college hockey this year. Because if there are more than 3, I'd be very surprised.
What about earlier than noon? I think there were a few earlier than noon games played in a couple of Atlantic hockey arenas.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, there definitely were some early ones. I remember 2019. RAT at Sacred Heart with 11 a.m. starts to stagger around the Harlem Globetrotters. So
we played at 10 one time there.
Yeah,
a kids game. Yeah, well, it was great. I had my post game nap, not my pregame nap, at 3.
And chicken parm at 7 a.m., right? Well, let's look at the matchups here. Let's pick our best first round matchup. Jim, you let us know ahead of time what yours is. So I'm going to let you go first, and Derek will follow after that. What's your favorite, your best first round matchup?
Yeah, well, I picked out UMass and Minnesota. What a battle that's going to be. We just talked about the fact that Minnesota is playing some great hockey right now, and they've had a fantastic season. And then UMass, the ability for them to kind of march through that tournament. They're the defending national champs. I mean, I just think the atmosphere, that's going to be a 6 p.m. game out in Worcester on Friday night. The atmosphere in that place will be great. And I think you've got a really fast team in in Minnesota, and a really good team at slowing teams down in UMass. So I'm interested to see, I watched UMass this weekend. Their interior defense was superb, and not a lot of shots getting through to the net because they block so many shots. Minnesota, though, they have the guns. They can move the puck really well. Will that be enough to keep UMass, from moving on for the chance to repeat as national champs?
I got the ND, the Battle of the NDs, Notre Dame, North Dakota. That's a blue blood who's who of college hockey, name-wise recognition. You got two of the top coaches in Jeff Jackson and Brad Berry. You've got the potential firepower of North Dakota turning their team around, the tough defensive style that Jeff plays, but also has opened up a little bit as his years have moved on. And I really believe that they're looking at that bottom of the bracket and going, you know what? That's not the winner of that game could go to the Frozen Four out of there. I wouldn't put it past it. I'm a big Minnesota State mark, but the winner of that game, Minnesota State's got to be looking going, oh, that's going to be a tough one if we get by Harvard.
People have already been labeling that one the bracket of death. And I think that's going to be a tough one for sure. As I look at matchups, maybe this isn't going to be the best matchup game-wise, but it's very intriguing to me, and that is Quinnipiac and St. Cloud. Quinnipiac has been poo-pooed by Western fans going along because they did play in a league that was down in strength of schedule, and we've talked quite a bit about ECAC. I'll be interested to see how Quinnipiac matches up. St. Cloud comes into this after being swept at home in the quarterfinals in the NCHC. They're looking to get back to the championship. But Quinnipiac, with great goaltending, the ability to play defense, it'll be fascinating to me to see how this one shakes out.
That was my second choice.
Well, I'm glad I didn't go first there. No, I think that, I agree with. I like the picks on all of those. The other one that I'm going to point out that leads us into our next discussion that I think is going to be a great first round matchup is Denver and UMass Lowell, especially if the Riverhawks can throttle the Pioneers. And that to me is probably the biggest 4-over-1 upset waiting to happen, because UMass Lowell is better in a normal year. I would say they are better than a fourth seed. They're probably a 3 seed, low 2 seed quality team that has been brought down because of strength of schedule in the East this year. But, if UMass Lowell can keep it a low scoring game, they could pull the upset.
They have the ability to play that type of game. Certainly. They play heavy. They're difficult to play against. They're difficult to move through the neutral zone against. They make you make mistakes and they transition off them. The one thing I noticed on this weekend on Friday night, the hockey semis for Lowell, was their first line got shut down. The line that features Carl Berglund and Andre Lee, they got shut down. And if you can slow down that line and shut them down, there's not enough depth below it. But the matchup I look at in that 4-over-1 potential, and I don't know that, in terms of the way the team's playing coming in, Northeastern didn't finish the season exactly the hottest team in the world, but they, did take care of some business the final weekend of the regular season to win the Hockey East regular season title. And if Devin Levi is hot and plays one of those Devin Levi games, Western Michigan is going to have their hands full. And Northeastern can find a way to win that game 1-0 if they have to. So Western's offense really can roll. They're a great team, but if they run into a hot Devin Levi, that could be your 4-1 upset.
I should have went first. I mean, obviously, my heart does not allow me to pick Northeastern to beat Western Michigan as an alum. But fact is, Western has not won an NCAA tournament game. I do not believe. You do have a world-class goalie who just was in the Olympics putting up world-class numbers. But you do have a hungry team. Pat Frischwater's done an outstanding job. They got two guys that I think should have been given more Hobie love in Tard and Frank. And I watched them play the other day, and they were really good against North Dakota. But if anybody's looking at it, that's the one, because the goalie. I mean, it comes down to that. Is the goaltender going to be able to put on a game and steal it 1-0, 2-1? Because Western has been out shooting teams, and Western is a very good hockey team. But I guess it's better that you picked it, Jimmy. So I expanded on your pick.
You didn't have to pick against your alma mater. I'm glad that Ed picked UMass Lowell as the potential upset, so I don't look like a homer in picking my alma mater.
Yeah, I'm not picking a 4-1. I just gave you my opinion, and I do agree, Ed, that Lowell would be a really good one. I've already said that I think Harvard is Minnesota State's going to use that going out east as a mantra that it happened a couple of years ago. So, and then the only other one is AIC Michigan. Is anybody going to put? I'm not going to spend your money on that one, Jimmy. I'm rooting for Eric Lang, but I'm not spending your money to bet on that one.
Well, here's how it could happen if it did happen, and I'd say the odds are very slim on that. Say AIC can get an early goal, maybe get a power play goal, and get a 2-0 lead. Michigan has shown they can come back, and they just have so much firepower. But if they can go into shutdown mode and AIC is able to get into that, and they've got the bodies to do that, that's the way it could happen. Do I think it's going to happen? No, but that's how it would happen if it did happen.
That's how it has to happen. That's how all these upsets. So you got to get off to a good lead. They did not last year in Fargo against North Dakota. They chased that game compared to when they beat St. Cloud. They had the lead, so they've got to get a lead. They can't let that fight song be played a lot for Michigan.
Well, with that, I think we've covered the weekend pretty well. It's going to be a great weekend coming up, and we'll take a look at that regional round and look ahead to the Frozen Four on our next edition next Monday. But this podcast episode has been brought to you by DCU Digital Federal Credit Union. What will DCU mean to you? Find out today by visiting dcu.org. Membership required. For Jim Connelly, for Derek Schooley, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been the USCHO Weekend Review Podcast, a production of U.S. College Hockey Online. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.